Last week was a case of quantity over quality through the professional wrestling I've consumed. Seemingly everyone ran shows over the weekend, though few of them had major consequences going forward. This was bound to happen with the next wave of major shows happening at the end of January and into February. Some of the matches themselves reached staggering highs, though it was easy to be distracted by the news of Kazuchika Okada leaving New Japan. It's a thing that's easy to say that it would happen, but feels unfathomable when it actually does. It's something that'll be speculated ad nauseum until he eventually signs somewhere else. But I am here to talk about the matches, which I have a handful that I'm eager to discuss. As always, a quick reminder that I haven't seen every single match to have taken place, and the ones I choose to talk about are all based on my personal enjoyment and nothing else. A slight spoiler warning as well, as I'll be talking about match finishes too. After watching 50 matches spanning 10 promotions, here are my favorites from the third week of January. The tagline for the third Sareee Produce show reads, "Saree's 2024 starts with a revenge." She was not false advertising here. When Sareee came back to Japan, her first match was against longtime foe Chihiro Hashimoto. Hashimoto would defeat Sareee, though nearly 8 months later, Sareee is at the apex of the Joshi scene, ready to get her win back. The occasion appears to get the best of Sareee as she tries to open the match with a strike, but Hash immediately counters with an emphatic takedown. Hash has a clear advantage on the ground and intends on keeping things here. I really appreciate Hash's cutoffs early in the match. Any sort of risks that Sareee attempts to take is dealt with ease. A drop down countered with a headlock instead of a usual leapfrog, a quick neutralizing of a dive attempt, or simply blocking a dragon screw. This continues for most of the first third of the match. Sareee finds more success when relying on striking, but rarely has the opening to do so. The cracks in the dam are visible though, and she just has to hang in there. After another impressive counter sequence out of a Matrix escape, Sareee has Hash on the floor again and is able to hit a flying cross body. This swings momentum as more high impact offense is introduced. A powerbomb from the apron to the floor propels the match into a brawl around Shinjuku face, which has come unglued by this point. Here you get Saree's patented forearms as well as a counter by Hash that's a unique take on the common Joshi chair spot. Instead of throwing her into the row of chairs, she just hoists Sareee up and tackles her into a pile of steel. Naturally, this leads us to an explosive finishing stretch, initiated by Sareee escaping a powerbomb by throwing as many headbutts as she possibly could. The two throw all their limbs at each other as hard as they can, and as the match is on a knife's edge, they both fall back into their own tendencies. Hash struggles to make the cover after pulling off her signature German, so goes back to sleeper attempts. But Sareee thrives in the chaos of a violent sprint, and after multiple sickening throws, she's able to hit her finisher for the victory, which, according to PuroLove.com, is a modified Uranage. I've been calling it a straitjacket exploder, but I'll be using this term from here on out. Shout out to them for that information, it's a great site in general. Additionally, the banner in Shinjuku face read Sun Goddess rather than Sun God, so I'll be sticking with that translation moving forward too. But this match absolutely delivered on the hype in my opinion. A genuine ass kicker in every sense of the word. The Sun Goddess has already opened her account for another banner year in 2024, thanks in part to one of her greatest opponents coming through once again. A case of making the most of your minutes. I had a lot going on heading into this week, and in this case it was for the better, as I was ignorant to a lot of the noise surrounding the world title matches between the major televised promotions in America. By the time Wednesday rolled around, it dawned on me that Hook has rarely ever been in a situation where he was the clear underdog. This made the prospect of this match incredibly interesting. Hook is the wild card here. He could have been squashed in 3 minutes and I'm sure I would have still enjoyed this, though clearly they had something else planned. Right off the bat, you get a strong visual of Hook, having his back turned to Samoa Joe until the bell rings. On the inverse, Joe never once takes his eyes off the challenger during the introductions. He seemed very agitated heading into this match, not necessarily dismissive, but annoyed with the audacity of Hook calling a shot amongst the field of challengers gunning for the Samoan submission machine. You could imagine how Joe would act upon that, but it's actually Hook who gets an upper hand first. Hook goes after Joe like a bat out of hell, swarming him with a flurry of strikes. He is well aware that Joe can and will bring him down to earth at a moment's notice, and here it only takes one elbow. It does a great job at establishing this dynamic. Hook has to stay aggressive and rely on agility to stand any chance against one of the best looming threats in all of wrestling. Joe is predictably great in control, frequently berating Hook to question his decision to step up like this. Obviously, the ragdolling and strikes are just gross at times. Most will look towards the wild table spot or the apron bomb, though there's a chop to Hook's back that just lingers into his skin for the duration. Conversely, all the violence that Joe provides makes anything Hook gets in all the more impactful. Now, as far as the 1 count from the Muscle Buster goes, I think 2 ways about it. I can totally see the argument against it, but I feel like they had one shot at getting this match right. If the crowd is invested, you might as well just bring out the big guns, and clearly it worked for so many. I think Hook hitting a suplex on Joe was just insane and probably should have been more emphasized, but that's just a nitpick. I appreciate that Hook going for a submission finish was ultimately his undoing. It wrapped things up nicely, illustrating that Hook still has a lot to learn. This match blew me away. I was speculating what a match between these two would look like, and this is probably the ideal version of it. It's the first AEW World Title match in a long time that carries this sort of energy with it, and the crowd lives and dies with everything Hook does for the 8-minute runtime. While the match is about Hook and elevating him through defeat, I don't think this would work as well as it did without Samoa Joe. There's a reason that many fans, including myself, are hoping that this world title reign is not a short one. He's a special wrestler with a lot left in the tank. I haven't had a reason to talk about Ring of Honor in a long time. Given recent booking patterns, I would have expected to see this match take place on an episode of Collision or Rampage. Luckily, Honor Club subscribers were given this first-time singles match between Claudio Castagnoli and AEW's newly signed bounty hunter Bryan Keith. A Claudio singles match in Ring of Honor can go a number of ways, especially against a new signing, though they opted for a match that's a good indicator of things to come for the bounty hunter. Early moments give a struggle for positioning, with Claudio naturally trying to outmuscle Keith. Whether it's a clever counter or just simply stepping up to Claudio, Bryan Keith never fails to bounce back with a ton of charisma. His facial expressions and the way he feeds off of the crowd complement all the hard striking traded between the two. When Claudio is able to execute, Keith does a great job of selling his offense. He makes an Irish whip look incredibly dangerous and bumps like crazy throughout. The ebb and flow of the near 13 minutes allows Keith to continually find his way back, nearly pulling off the upset in a furious closing exchange. A final display of his tenacity is not succumbing to the giant swing, only for Claudio to resort to a sleeper variation, which is just a crazy visual. I had a lot of fun with this, especially on rewatch. It's a great showing for Keith, and I'm very excited to see more of him on television. If you've been out on Ring of Honor lately, this is definitely one worth going out of your way for. In my Match of the Year special, I touched on how Bryan Danielson spent most of 2023 having stellar babyface performances, though he couldn't help himself when crossing paths with Eddie Kingston. The main event of last week's Collision revisits this, and outside of the high stakes of the Continental Classic, we find the American Dragon leaning into this at an insufferable level. He spends the first 3 minutes or so just showboating. He's beloved to the audience despite how he treats Eddie Kingston and really tries to drive this point home, going up to the corner to hot dog and even abandoning striking exchanges to do so. When Eddie is able to get his hits in, he tags in Ortiz for some combination offense. When Claudio comes in, Ortiz endures most of the punishment. It'd be easy to assume that he's here to take the pin, but I really like what he brought to this match. He bumps for everything thrown at him, and his comebacks are strong. The tag cut off into a giant swing was an especially cool moment between the two. Danielson taunting Ortiz during his kicks is only further poking Eddie before he returns to the ring, which conveniently gives us another exchange between him and Claudio. By now you should know how that goes. Later we get our finish as Danielson busts out the yes chants simply to spite Kingston, making him watch his friend eat a Busaiku knee and the pinfall. Danielson adds insult to injury by spitting in Kingston's face, a recurring incident from their tournament matches, and claims he won't hold his titles for much longer. Certainly more of a fun little match than the ceilings of Collision main events, but this is full of great character work, and given who's in it, you'd know the action will be good. There's a bit of dead air with all the showboating, but I couldn't help but love just how far Danielson would go just to be a massive jerk here. It's clear now that we're getting at least one more heel program for Bryan on this final run as a full-time wrestler. Kingston is naturally a great foil for that, and a title defense against the American Dragon will do wonders to elevate the new Triple Crown. And before I go, here are a few honorable mentions. Dustin Rhodes vs Christian Cage from AEW January 17th. Really good throwback of a match between two pros. Leave it to a combined age of 104 to put together a great TNT title match. Team Noah vs Keno, Yu Owada, and Taishi Ozawa from Noah January 17th. Some further viewing from the Shiozaki-Keno match from last week. After losing his I Am Noah catchphrase, Shiozaki's new look resembles that of a rookie, and in turn is wrestling two of Noah's rookies. It's a very on-the-nose reset for him, but given how good he is with these stories, I suggest getting in on the ground floor. Kung Fu Masters vs Dragon Daya and Ryoya Tanaka from Dragon Gate January 21st. A blast of a tag team match fought at breakneck pace. I found myself going out of my way for Tanaka's matches lately. Hyper Misao and Shoko Nakajima vs Miyu Watanabe and Rika Tatsumi from Tokyo Joshi Pro January 21st. I was a big fan of Rika and Shoko's match over the summer, and they still share great chemistry, though it's the strength and speed dynamic of Watanabe and Nakajima that takes the spotlight in this match. And last but not least, Bryan Keith vs Mao from DDT January 21st. Some further viewing for the Bounty Hunter as he made his debut in Japan over the weekend. This Universal title match is pretty much all fireworks, just two cool wrestlers doing cool stuff. And that is it from me. If you got this far into the video, thank you so much for your time and for hearing what I have to say. Be sure to do all of the obligatory YouTube stuff by liking and subscribing, and find me on Twitter or Blue Sky at Outer Stevan. Let me know if I missed anything worth checking out, and I'll talk to you again next week.